Okay, hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is Chelsea. We are doing the April wrap-up video today, and it was a very interesting month. I moved at the end of March and got super sick like 5 days after we moved. So the beginning of this month was a little off, but I had a pretty interesting month of reading. I've got some all-time new faves. They are contemporary romances. I don't even know. But I'm excited to talk about them. So let's just hop right in. I had one DNF. I like to do these videos kind of from worst to best, in my opinion. So I had one DNF, but I'll just talk about really briefly because then I had a lot of fun stuff I read. What was it called? Yep, so Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone by Benjamin Stevenson. It's kind of like a thriller murder mystery. I thought I was in the mood for it. There were a few things that came in through the library this month that maybe I wasn't quite in the mood for. I liked the beginning of this. I thought it was really funny how he was talking to the audience, kind of quippy, kind of just saying things like, I'm not gonna lie to you, and all of this stuff. But that's what the story is about. Everyone in his family has murdered someone, and I want to say like 30-40% in, and just kind of I liked the beginning so much and then just quickly wasn't into it. It was like the first thing I read after being really sick for like a week. Like couldn't even read or watch TV sick. It really sucks. I haven't been that sick in a long time. So maybe I'll try to read that one again at some point because it's a funny idea, but I just slowly like stopped caring about the characters and just figured I'd move on to something else. The next thing I moved on to, it's the first thing in my list. I gave this book 3 stars. Again, maybe I was just still not feeling great because I normally really like this author. It's Masters of Death by Olivia Blake, and I gave this 3 stars. This just wasn't my favorite Olivia Blake book. I really liked her Atlas 6. I really liked Alone with You in the Ether. Masters of Death wasn't the best one. I kind of barely remember what it was. I sort of remember the plot. It was just a little all over the place. I think what it was there was so many characters in this and it was just very wordy, and even early on just felt like we were in, scenes for so long and it just never kind of got past that. But Death is like a character and he has a human son, and there's a bunch of there's angels in this world and ghosts and vampires. So it sounds like such a fun idea. I guess I just didn't like what it ended up being. I just didn't really feel too connected to it. Okay, and then I actually ended up reading 2 cowboy romances this month. I know, who even is she? I liked them both. The first one, Dawn and Dusted, I liked a lot. I only gave it 3 stars. The other one we'll talk about in a bit because I like that one a bit more. But I don't know if I really even need to talk much about this book. It's been frickin' everywhere for a couple months. It's by Lila Sage. And I really liked it. Very solid 3-star. I loved the small time vibes. There was a lot of really fun characters. We had, our main character has ADHD, which you kind of don't see in books, or I don't see in books too much, especially romance novels. This is going to be a companion series, I believe. I know another book just came out recently, and then there's going to be a 3rd one by the end of the year. So there was a little bit of setup for the town and some of the other couples that we'll be getting later on. And I thought the siblings in this were really fun. Basically, we have our girl, Emmy. She's got a few other boy siblings, and this is her first time back in town in several years. She is a competitive horse rider, and her family, she lives on a farm, hasn't been back there in years, and she got thrown off, so she's been having really bad panic attacks and can't get back on a horse basically. So she comes home, and the love interest is kind of her brother's friend, but also the bad boy of this town. And he owns the local bar there, and they have a romance. I would say this book wasn't overly romantic. I liked the story, and I really liked a lot of the characters and the small time vibes. But I wasn't, I don't know, I wasn't giggly or swooning over this couple. I really liked that they got together. There's a few other characters that I think will be more interesting in the future. But this was a really fun read, and I love this cover so much. I liked it a lot. So then I have Spark of the Everflame by Penn Cole. This is a fantasy romance. This was a very slow burn fantasy romance. I gave it 3 stars. I'm interested in continuing the series. It's the first book. I believe there's going to be 4 books, and I've heard the next one is really amazing. My only big critique with this book, while I liked the setup, I felt like this book was kind of like a prologue, even though it was obviously a long book. It was just a bit slow. It was nice. I guess it was nice. It was nice to get this set up. That's not a bad thing. I understand where we are in the story, and the end was great. I like our main character and some of the other characters. I can't wait to kind of get more into the story. I didn't feel like a ton of stuff happened. It was just very like setting up the plot and the situation. And I was warned that this book is very slow burn. So if you are interested in reading it, just know that. Our main character is interesting. I keep kind of going back and forth on her. I like her. She's a healer. She's pretty smart. I don't always agree with her choices, but she's going to be an interesting one to follow, I think. There's a few love interests. Basically, in the beginning of this book, she sees her mother talking to someone in an alleyway, and then her mom never comes home, and months go by, she never comes home. Her mother was a healer for like the king and the royalty in this land, and she is gonna start taking up some of those responsibilities. There's a huge social class structure between the people that have magic and like the normal humans. And she starts to slowly kind of get on the side of the resistance, and she has sort of a love interest who I go back and forth on. I think I liked him at first. He has some sweet moments, and then he does some stuff that's really like red flag city. So I'm not sure about him. And then we of course have a very we have a prince who is very handsome and dark, and she hates him. So that's gonna be interesting as that develops. But yeah, the only reason I kind of rated it a little lower was just I was really anticipating on loving this book, and I think it was really good. And I think it was a very interesting book, but very slow burn. All right, then I read, I read King of Pride, and this is by Anna Wong. I gave this book 4 stars, and I love Anna Wong's writing. I've talked about her before in different videos, but this was such a good palate cleanser. I read this kind of right after the book I DNF'd and Masters of Death. I read kind of both of them and just wasn't feeling either of them. So this was just a really good palate cleanser. I liked both POVs. Her romance stories are really fun to read. They're kind of like watching a soap opera. They're very dramatic. There's like a good amount of story and plot. There's a good amount of character development. There's a good amount of spice. This was sort of like a kind of Pride and Prejudice sort of retelling. This is part of, I think it's called The Kings of Sin. It's the second book. I read The King of Wrath last month, and I liked this one a little better. I think I liked this couple a little better. And I'm glad I started reading these. I kind of had been putting them off for a little while because I liked her Twisted series so much. And I kind of heard one bad review about The King of Wrath, and just didn't just took my time picking it up. But King of Greed is already out, and that's like a second chance romance, I think. And that's not my favorite, but I will probably read that. And then King of Sloth just came out, so I would definitely want to read that because those characters sound fun. But in this story, we have Isabella, who is a friend of the girl from the first book, and she's a bartender at the Valhalla club that they all belong to. And Kai is, I believe he's British, and he's from a very rich family who owns this big media corporation that he's trying to become CEO of. It's really off limits for club members to fraternize with people that work at this bar. So yeah, So yeah, but they obviously do. So yeah, it was a really fun palate cleanser and I had a really good time reading it, and I would really suggest any of her books are usually at least a 4-star for me. Okay, then we have House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. I love this cover a lot. This is definitely a very cozy fantasy, which I am sometimes in the mood for, sometimes not. It was very sweet. There were kids in this book, and sometimes I hate kids in books, but they were good in this book. So this was just kind of a sweet, easy read. I liked it. I gave it 4 stars. Basically, he's a caseworker for like the magical department for kids. And he gets sent on this assignment, and he's a very by the books guy, and he works for a place that has very strict rules. And I don't want to give away too much more than that. He gets sent to this house on an island far away, and there's a bunch of kids that live there, and he kind of falls for the headmaster and like falls in love with these kids who would be honestly like at risk or not treated well if they were in any other situation. But the headmaster there really cares about their well-being, and there's and yeah, it was just a really cute story. Read it very quickly. I'm very interested to read more by this author because it's the first time I've read by them, and it was just a good time. Okay, now we have Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands. And if you read Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, you'll probably love this book if you loved that one. This is also a little bit of a cozy romance. I get that vibe. I get really immersed in this world. Same with the first book. I wouldn't say it's something I think of too much anymore. When I first read it, it really had an impact. I think these are just such sweet stories. The couple's dynamic and their banter is so cute. Emily is a really good main character. She's an academic. She's really smart, and I just think her way of seeing the world is so different from a lot of the fantasy books that we get. If you liked that first book, you'll probably really like this one too. I feel like it's just as good and just as sweet. Okay, then we had A Promise of Peridot by Kate Golden. I talked about this at length in a video I did earlier this month, my most anticipated reads, and I tabbed the hell out of this. I don't know if you can see it. I had a little more time to kind of sit with it because I wasn't sure how I felt about it. And while I have to say, I think it was so highly anticipated for me that I felt like it was a bit of a disappointment when I read it. But I don't really feel that way anymore. I think it was just a really good book, not a great book. And while I had fun reading it, and I think the end was really great, my main problem with it was just, I think the plot was a little lacking until we got to the end. I am more of a character girly, so I did like that we eventually got some good character development for our main female character. Erwin, I always say her name wrong. She did progress over the book, and her love story with Cain is really sweet. I don't want to say too much about this book just because it's the second in a series. A Dawn of Onyx is the first book, and it starts off, she is a healer who kind of takes the rap for her brother who committed a crime, and she ends up getting taken by the King of Onyx. And she tries to escape from him a bunch of times, and there's a romance, and there's fae in this world, and it's really fun. I really liked that we were like on a ship and like going to different places in this book. But again, I just felt like the plot was just a little lacking. And while I feel like she did get some good character development, it took a little while. She was kind of not great at the beginning of this book. And then by the end, that's when like the plot really started going crazy and shit hit the fan. 4 stars. I'm very excited. I think that last book comes out later this year, so I'll definitely be checking that out when it comes out. Okay, then I read Blood and Steel by Helen Schuler, and I gave this 4 stars. This is probably my favorite new fantasy romance I read this month. It's part of the Legends of Thesmar series, and this was a great first book. I read it very quickly. I just needed to know what happened. I was in, and while some of it was a little predictable, really good setup for a first book. The only reason I didn't give it 5 stars was, yes, predictable for a first book in a fantasy romance series. They set up the world pretty good. A lot of the character development was a little lacking. They set up people really well, but they were very surface level characters, so I would like to get a little more out of them, a little more from the story. The romance was a little lacking. I really like our main character a lot, and I liked the guy a lot too. But they were sort of just together a little bit. It's like a student-teacher type relationship, so I'm hoping in the next book that will develop nicely. I just want more in the second book, I guess. More of the story, more of the fantasy elements, more of the romance, the love interest. So pretty much when we start this book, Althea, I think is her name. So we're in a place where women they used to be allowed to train and become warriors, but they haven't been for years because of reasons. But they haven't been for years because of like a prophecy or something like that. And all her life, all she wants to do is train. And for one reason or another, some stuff happens and she ends up being allowed to train with the guys. And she's the first woman in a long time that's been allowed to, so she has to deal with kind of a lot of, just the BS of like some of the guys not wanting her there and all of this stuff. And I'm hoping in the next book there'll be like some more female warriors, just because it's just her. And there's an interesting war going on. But yeah, I really, really got into it. So yeah, in the next month, I hope I read the next book or 2. I think there's only 3 in the series, so hopefully I will like them just as much as this one. And then we have Flawless by Elsie Silver. This was my other cowboy romance that I read this month. I've been wanting to get into Elsie Silver and this series in particular forever because everyone speaks so highly of it. This is the first book in the Chestnut Springs series. I'm way behind. She's got another series that's coming out that everyone's talking about, but hopefully I'll read that at some point. And I really liked this. I've heard the next 2 books in the series, I think it's like Heartless and something else, are like the 2 faves in this series. So while I don't think this one's going to be my favorite, the banter in the book was great. The love story was great. We met a lot of fun characters who will be in the rest of the books, and I really liked her writing style. I really liked how these 2 kind of had to deal with each other and then started falling in love with each other. There was like a good amount of spice in this book, and it was just a really fun like small town cowboy romance. Basically, Rhett is like a professional bull rider. He's got like some public image issues going on, and Summer is there kind of to babysit him to make sure he doesn't get into any more trouble, and just to like kind of save his public image. But I liked her character a lot too because she wasn't even sure if she was like in the line of work she wants to be doing. There was a lot of drama going on with like her sister and her family. And then I loved his family. They're basically all the love interests in this book are kind of like his siblings. So this was such a fun read, and I'm just glad I finally got into Elsie Silver. I think I said 4 stars. Yes, 4 stars. Definitely can't wait to continue reading this series. And oh boy, we have A Crown This Cold and Heavy by Stasia Stark. I also give this 4 stars. So this is the 3rd book in the Kingdom of Lies series. I can't wait. The 4th book is supposed to come out at the end of May. I thought it was supposed to be out already, so I am sad that we have to keep waiting. While the ending was wild, I think I liked the 2nd book a little more than this. I'm pretty sure I gave the 2nd book 5 stars. But this is one of my favorite new fantasy romance series that I've read this year. I love our main character so much. I liked in this book we got some other POVs too. There was like a love interest happening with her brother, and there was just a few other things happening. The Queen storyline has gotten really interesting, and yeah, I'm really just wondering how this story ends. So yeah, it's been kind of a wild ride, but I really love this world. I kind of want to reread all of these books again once the 4th one comes out. Okay, and then the last 2 books are my 5-star reads of the month. They are both contemporary romances. And while that's a little out of character for me, just because I'm so hit or miss with them most of the time, I should have known because these were 2 of my most anticipated books of the year. The first book is Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. I absolutely love this book. I ate this book up. Justin is one of my new book boyfriends. Abby is just a queen. She's such a good writer. I loved Yours Truly last year, and I'm so glad I discovered her. Her writing is just amazing. I love her books because it's got a great romance in it, but it also is just a great story. Like, even without the romance, it's like reading an amazing romance and a great story. Just their personal relationship and then the romantic relationship of these two characters was out of this world. I think this is my first 5-star of a contemporary romance for this year. And it just made me so happy reading it. I knew from the beginning that I was loving it, and it just like kept getting better and better as I was reading it. The character development was amazing. They both had a lot going on, like in their personal lives, and I just thought the love story was so sweet. Just to give you the gist, so we have Justin, who put out a Reddit post about how every time he dates a girl, they break up, and then the next person she starts dating ends up being like the person she marries, the love of her life, and he feels like he's kind of cursed. And then Emma actually responds to him because basically the same thing has happened with her, and they make this agreement to date each other for a little bit, like go on like 4 or 5 dates, and kind of just to like try to break this curse. And then they slowly date and fall in love. She's got a lot of trust issues and stuff going on just because of her mom and like some abandonment issues from when she was a kid. And then Justin also has a few things going on like with his mom and his family. It's funny one moment and then it had me crying the next. It was just such an intense, fun read. And it's such a pretty cover. I keep staring at it, and yep, there's a fun, cute dog, just like in all her books. Yeah, if you haven't read Abby Jimenez yet, just do it. I want to read everything that she's ever written. This was just so amazing, and probably going to be one of my top books of this whole year. I really, really loved it. And then last up, we have Funny Story by Emily Henry. Gave this book 5 stars. In my notes, I literally just wrote perfect. This book was also featured in the video, my most anticipated new releases video. So I already talked a lot about my thoughts on this while I was reading it. But Emily Henry is just one of my favorite authors. I'm just so happy that I loved this book. I felt 5-star vibes from the beginning. I just loved the way that the story was told. I loved our main character, Daphne. I loved Miles is probably another great new book boyfriend. But this one kind of rivaled Beach Read, which is my favorite book. Fake dating is one of my favorite tropes. And I just thought their story was so sweet. And just the story, Daphne going through it, and trying to like find herself. I just really related, and I was just crying by the end of this book. So in the beginning of this book, she gets broken up with by her ex-fiance because he and his longtime friend from childhood have decided to get together. And, you know, she's obviously upset. They were going to get married. She doesn't have any place to go. She moved to the small town for him. So she ends up moving in with Miles, who is the guy, so the girl he left her for, her boyfriend that she just broke up with. So they're both basically just really sad, and they both are roommates, and they're just basically really sad that this happened kind of abruptly for them. But what I liked about this story and a lot of Emily Henry books is similar to Abby Jimenez. There's such a good story here, even without the romance happening. I just love Daphne's journey of like depending on people and just kind of like finding herself. And just because in the relationship, it was always like, we do this, we like this, you know, we. And then she kind of figured out what she likes, and, you know, finding her own friends and liking this town that she lives in that she hasn't really explored. And her, you know, enjoying, she's a like children's librarian, and how much she loves her job, and some of the issues she's had like with her dad and all of this stuff. The only thing that was a little weird with this book, and I don't even think it's really a criticism, I just gotten so used to dual POVs that it was kind of funny that this book, we didn't have a dual POV, even though we really like, even though Miles' character was really well developed too. At first, he's also really sad because he's been broken up with. And he's just such a good guy. He, one, works for a winery, so already love him. And just the way he goes about like trying to show her this town and trying to like interact with her just kind of before they're even really like falling for each other is really, really sweet. And yeah, I talked about this book enough in the other video, but like I just really loved it. So yes, 5 stars, beautiful book. I haven't physically bought it yet though, just because I feel like with romances, I want the paperback. I'm not really like that with any other genre, but something about a romance, I just don't really want the hardcover, and that's all that's out right now. So hopefully when the paperback comes out, I'll add it to my collection. But thank you guys so much for watching. I feel like this month I was a little all over the place just from moving and being sick, and then reading some stuff that I wasn't quite into, but then reading a bunch of fantasy romances that I liked, and then reading some of my 2 favorite new books, and probably top books of the year so far. Thank you so much for supporting this channel. If you haven't yet, please like and subscribe so you don't miss any of my videos, and I will see you guys in the next one.